Hello and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. I am Ekta Maheshwari. I work as a lead data scientist with Accenture Baltics. It's an integral part of Europe where we help clients embrace new sustainable solutions in today's data-driven business world. Along this, I am a data science educator at AlmaBetter, where I teach data science and coach data enthusiasts like you guys to build a career in the world of data. And I welcome you all to today's Data Science Career Workshop. These sessions are an integral part of Learn, Earn, and Return program that we offer at AlmaBetter, where we every week invite folks from the data science community to connect with young enthusiasts like you guys. It's also a very good opportunity to ask all your burning questions to the industry experts that we have on the panels. The link to the previous session would be present in the description box, so feel free to drop by and check them out, just in case you had similar questions in your mind. Okay, that being said, let's welcome our guest for today and a very dear friend of mine, Mr. Nayan Dharamshi. Hey Nayan, how's your day going?
Hi, Ekta. Very good morning to you and everyone else who's on the call. I'm doing extremely well today. Bangalore is very gloomy and uh, typical Saturday weather for Bangalore. So yes, all good.
Absolutely, yes. All right. So to all our learners and attendees, Nayan is a data science leader with more than 10 years of hands-on experience in the field of analytics, leading diverse teams and working on product development and deployment in the field of retail and manufacturing domain. He has immense experience working for early stage startups and Fortune 50 companies and organizations and has delivered state of art AI and ML products. So thank you so much for joining, and we are very excited to have you here today.
Same here, Ekta. It's quite an opportunity to be here and sharing the learnings with all the people that are joining us today. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So then, tell us about your journey. How did you end up in the field of data science, and what intrigued you the most?
Yeah, so I think it's almost a decade back old story, but I'll also go into a little bit of a context. So I call myself experimenter, and just to explain why that is. So I am an electronics engineer. Went for a management and marketing. My first job was in retail operations, merchandise planning, and then right now in data science, right? So it's like various different fields which maybe bring together on how to really solve a business problem. But what keeps all of these things, or the choice of these, some of them were incidental and some of them were very chosen decisions that have been. But it was almost about 10 years back when I started my career with Target Corporation, and I was in one of the merchandise planning teams. During that point, it was primarily analytics. Data science as a buzzword was not very famous then,
Hmm.
or not very so much into the industry. And Target at that point had analytics team, and I got an opportunity to laterally move into one of those teams. And just to call out one instance, so for a lot of young joiners today, 10 years back, a lot of corporates used to use software called as SAS, statistical
Yeah.
analysis software. And that's where a lot of us would have begun our journeys into analytics and data science. And as slowly things progressed, more corporates were more open to, let's say, picking up open source. Having said that, I think what intrigued me about analytics and data science primarily is the data-driven decision making, while moving from gut-based decisions, where a lot of experienced leaders just use their experience or
Instincts. Yeah.
their instincts, the pulse of the business to take decisions, to how we
Correct.
can enable them to make use of data and make much more better decisions, right? So that's one of the key things that has been in my
Hmm.
mind.
Correct. Correct. So, you seem to have a journey overall. So, what's the most exciting part about being a lead data scientist for you right now?
Right. So I think one of the most exciting thing of where I am right now, it's also a little bit about the organization that I work with. It's obviously a journey, and you
Hmm.
eventually figure out, and we'll discuss this in some of the later time. But what works is that every organization has its own persona, and the organization that I right now work with is Kmart Australia. I work out of their Bangalore office in CAS. And one thing that's phenomenally good about this role that I play here is the entire data science team sits out of Bangalore. And the kind of impact that the products that we build have is directly seen, right? So let's say if you build any product and the business starts using them, the value that gets generated, and eventually when you hear from the leaders or stakeholders that the decisions that it is helping us make, that's what keeps the team growing.
Hmm. Correct. It's all about, the environment that brings out the best interdisciplinary skills, I would say, that helps
Yeah,
us, go for our day, and not every day is same for us. It's just new things, new day, every day. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Okay. So, for someone who's just got into data science or want to transition into data science, what should they do? You seem to have an, amazing career across these decades. So, where do I start from? What should I, immediately focus myself upon?
Correct. So obviously, what I would say is that it should be very clear in your mind on why data science, right? There should be a very strong backing on what is making you choose this. That's because it's just a start of a very long journey that anybody would be
Hmm.
walking through, right?
Right.
That point is just a starting point, but once you have decided that, yes, that's why I believe a lot of you guys are here. Once you have decided that I want to do a career in data science, I think what's extremely important is that you have a very well curated roadmap, which will take you from where
Hmm.
a person is right now to where a person aspires to be. Along with that,
Hmm.
I think right now things are quite progressing in the industry, right? It's no more of a resume thing. Resume is a very important part of the process. What skills can you demonstrate? Have you demonstrated something, or have you built something in your experience that you might be a student, but still a lot of courses and education courses are also getting outcome driven, right?
Hmm.
So some of
Correct.
those skills come in very handy um, to become a good data scientist. And eventually, then it is following through the curriculum or roadmap that you have, work with coaches, mentors, or maybe a good peer group to
Hmm.
help you achieve what you aspire to.
Correct. Very, very rightly mentioned. It can be, somebody who's applying with you, or you've been studying as a study group with them. They give a lot of different, direction. But yeah, the importance of roadmap, very, very like important, because it's a vast sea, and you just jump in and you might see n number of things to do in data science, but you need to zero down on few things so that you know how to start your learning in the first place. Yeah.
Exactly. Just to add on Ekta here, I think one thing that I can recollect is like maybe 20 years or 30 years back,
Hmm.
it was very simple to become or choose a specific career. All you had to do is walk into a library, pick up maybe the only book that the library has, read that book, and you can maybe interview for that position, right? But the hard
Yeah.
part there was getting to the library and getting access to that resource. But right now, the challenge is more moved to you have tons and tons of material on uh, internet. right? It might be
Correct.
moves, it might be blogs, it might be courses, it might be platforms. But then, what's the right platform that works, right? It has to be curated to your strengths, your aspirations. It cannot be one size fits all, right? And hence,
Absolutely.
that's the thing that I would want to say, that it's extremely important to maybe get into the field.
Correct, correct, absolutely. So, Nayan, we have, you've clearly mentioned that the world is transitioning, it's no more just get into, a particular library, get your degrees done or something. We have definitely entered in the world of pandemic where everything is digital. Now the recruitment drives or referral interviews, every event happens online. The best part about that is, I could appear for an interview sitting in one part of the world and apply for a role in another part of the world. That is definitely, changed a lot. But one thing that hasn't changed at all, which you mentioned earlier, is the one pager resume. you know Talking about resume, how do I make a killer resume? How do I showcase or prove that I really did what I did? What I'm talking about is actually, been something that I have been implementing or working on it for a long time. How do I put all of these efforts of mine in a one page resume?
Sure. I think it's a very good question, and the way I would like to answer is, uh, you will have to market yourself uh, to two people, right? One, the person who is responsible to shortlist the resume, and
Hmm.
secondly, the person who is the decision maker or has a play in the decision making, that okay, this is the candidate, right? And both of these people are significantly different, right?
Hmm.
Resume is extremely important for the first person who is maybe shortlisting. Nowadays, it might not necessarily be a person, a HR person who's shortlisting. It might be automated software that's screening resumes and trying to find
Correct.
fitment to the job, right? So it's extremely
Hmm.
important for aspirant to have a very good structured resume with the right keywords, with the right kind of projects that showcase the skills, maybe have a few references or profile
Hmm.
links on the project that they have done on the resume. So
Correct.
some of these things will play an important part for the person to get shortlisted. But what's also extremely important is, what's going to get you shortlisted is not going to help you get the job.
Hmm.
Once a person is at the interview table, it's what really you have done, right? It's
Hmm.
more of what can you build. Do you really have the skills, the right attitude, or the right kind of personality that would fit in the organizations that you are interviewing with? A lot of these things come into play to decide that okay, will this candidate get an offer or not?
Right, right. So, so does that mean then should I put all the buzzwords that I have done? Maybe I might have done feature engineering, but should I put all the techniques and all the buzzwords around feature engineering, or should I stick to what I've done and not glorify it to some extent? Or, what degree should I glorify? If yes, then.
Correct, correct. So obviously, right, if you have not done anything or if you do not know about a specific thing, the suggestion is not to put it on your resume, because as I said, it might get you on the interview table, but it's going to be extremely hard to be able to crack that interview.
Right.
Having said that, there has to be a right balance, right? You do not want to lie or fake your resume, but
Hmm.
it is still possible that maybe, let's say, uh, while I have 70% experience of working on a lot of techniques, there are maybe 20 or 30% of the things that I'm mentioning on my resume, which I'm theoretically comfortable with.
Hmm.
I know how it works. I have read maybe research papers or blog articles or maybe done a course, but I haven't got an opportunity to implement in real world. So that's still okay, right? But
Right.
definitely what's not encouraged is, if you're not comfortable with something, just putting them on your resume to get an interview
Hmm.
is not a good thing.
Right. So a half part of it is getting shortlisted. Maybe you might get shortlisted because of the buzzword, but if you cannot defend it, you lose the credibility of talking even about any of the further stuff that you might have actually done then. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Right. So I am ready with my portfolio now. I am ready with my resume, and now that is when I want to start looking out for the job. So how do I get started with the interview process? How do I get the job in the first place? What do I do?
Yeah. So I think, what's different in the industry is there's no global definition of any of these roles, right? I know
Hmm.
today we are talking of a data scientist as a role, but there's no global definition of what a data scientist does, right?
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
if let's say I pull up a data scientist resume or data scientist job descriptions from 10 different organizations, they'll
Hmm.
all be very different, correct? So
Correct.
what's important is that, and the same is true with each of us as personalities or people, right? So what's
Hmm.
important is to figure out the kind of background that we are coming from, right? Or what are it's essentially performing a SWOT analysis kind of a thing on me as a person,
Hmm.
right? Like what are my
Hmm.
strengths? What are my opportunity areas, right? And trying to balance that with what kind of a role that I would like to apply for, right?
Hmm.
Maybe just to give an example, let's say if my strength is that I'm extremely good at determining very minuscule of the things, understanding very minute documents or how
Hmm.
users interact with maybe products, etc. I might be a very good data science product manager, right? Whereas if I'm very good at explaining technical stuff in a business language,
Hmm.
trying to figure out how to convert a business problem to a data science problem, work with data scientists to solve it, then I can be a very good, maybe a product manager or maybe a data science leader. But on the other hand, on the technical spectrum, let's say it's again a mixture of a lot of things, right? Let's say if I come from a data engineering background, or let's say I have a strong inclination towards databases, right? A lot of us here are
Hmm.
freshers. So let's say if I have a strong inclination towards SQL or NoSQL based databases, so maybe data engineering might be a good aspect there. Uh, if somebody is more has a lot of patience, open to experimenting, has a
Hmm.
lot of multi-skilled kind of or open to explore different avenues, then data scientist is the thing, right? So what is important for all of us is to understand that no role is bigger than the other, right? All roles are extremely important of the same, let's say, data science product family. To ship a product out, everything is extremely important. What works out best, maybe for me as a person, might not work best for you, Ekta, right? So, and that's where
Correct.
the background, my strengths, what my aspirations, all of these things come in, and then if I'm able to make a good judgment on, okay, this is the role that I would want to aim for, and maybe take a roadmap or a cohort based some approach to get there, the chances of me getting into a job and also being happy in the job, right, both would be very high.
Hmm. Very important. Yeah. Right, right. It's the best part, I think, about the entire data science is it's such a nice workflow that, even if you find yourself fitting in one part, you are sorted for, the next 5 or 10 years down the line. You know that, if something that, makes building something or, having a product in front of you might be something that interests you, you are right for the data engineering side. You build pipelines, you see that, things happening actually on the paper or on the down the line. If you are more of a trial and experimenting person, you are somewhere aiming yourself to go around and work around the algorithms and all. So it's no one-stop solution that go to a particular shop and you do need to do all of these stuff. Maybe not. Maybe you can wear multiple hats, but what if you just want to zero down and be a master of one hat? So yeah, that makes sense. So we've talked about the preparation. We talked about resume, but as you mentioned, there are multiple roles, and but as a fresher, I might I have studied I have studied statistics, I've studied mathematics, I've studied kind of the probability side and the programming side. I've done all of them, but I don't know what's good for me. Like, what if I want to do product analytics? And you mentioned that, if you are an amalgamation of things, I don't want to do too much of machine learning, but should I also do machine learning because it looks really cool? Everybody's talking about it. How do I find out what's good for me at a grassroots level?
Correct. That's a very good question, Ekta, right? Because I think I was reading one of the books, and the quote there was that it's very easy to get to where you want to go, right? But it's hard to determine where do you really want
Where
to
to
go,
go?
right?
Yeah,
So if you're really sorted on where do you want to go, the path is easy. All you need to do is Google the right thing, right? And obviously,
correct.
right now we did talk about overload information, but there are ways to manage that. But how to go? I think uh, there could be a variety of approaches. Let's say if a person is very clear or has a very directional path, then it becomes easy. But let's take a average person, maybe somebody like me, right? In my early days, it was extremely hard. Like, how do I direct my career? So for somebody like that, I think what's important is to work with a coach or a mentor to get some ideas. Like, what are the possibilities? Maybe try to figure out where your strengths are, right? Do not let's say you come from a background which is non-CS, non-IT, or maybe
Yeah,
have experience which is non-data science related. Do not think that will not be valued, right?
correct.
All that is important is that how do you use your education and your experience to build a profile and target companies in that area. Let me just take an example to explain this
Sure. Yeah.
articulatively. Let's say there's a person called John. He's let's say a MRO guy in manufacturing, right? More of working out on orders and returns and figuring out analysis
Correct.
around that, right? Now, this person, let's say, wants to get into data science. So this person already has a very good knowledge about how manufacturing processes work. This guy has done BTech in mechanical, right? So has a
Okay.
very good idea of how these in machinery or stuff work, right? So now this person and also this guy has built very good Excel skills, presentation skills in the role of what as a MRO analyst, right? Now,
Okay.
for this person, leaving all of these things and hoping to become a data scientist, let's say in an unrelated field, is going to be much harder, right? But
Right.
let's just say if this guy is able to use his education, the experience, and try to position himself as a data scientist in the manufacturing area, right? To solve, let's say, problems in faulty returns or frauds, or
Hmm.
maybe trying to find problems in manufacturing equipment, like
Yeah.
what's the lifetime value remaining of engine, kind of a thing, right? So directly is able to correlate all the learnings and experience in data science, right? Also,
Hmm.
a lot of people have this misconception that data science is just models, right? So that's the other point. Business or the knowledge of the process is also an important point, right? So that's what I was just trying to explain with this example.
Right. Absolutely. I think leveraging your past experience is always going to be a added advantage for you, and it might help you stand out from the crowd as well. Because you've been into the system, you know at every step where you're going to fall out, or you might know where are the challenges that might come up, and you exactly know, which business. The entire part of data science is problem solving. If you do not identify the problem in the first place, you might have to think, where do I fit in data science in the first place to even apply? So absolutely, I kind of now understand what is good for me and which direction I should maybe zero down myself on. So, Nayan, can you give us example? For example, if I am going to an interview with the large companies, or and I'm new to machine learning, and I've also learned coding for the just past couple of months, how do I communicate this with the hiring manager to leverage my strength? Is it going to be different for, say, if I apply for FANG, or if I apply for any traditional Fortune 500 companies, or if I apply for any startup who's just starting up, how do I communicate, what is my strengths? You mentioned SWOT, what's my opportunity, what's my threat? How do I put this out? I might always be in the fear as a fresher, thinking that, if I put this out, I might be rejected, or I might not get selected for the next round. Do you think the strategies are different, or do you think you should always be transparent and talk about, everything? Or
Yeah.
how do I keep that in first place?
Yeah. So see, being a fresher, it can be hard, right? As we spoke
Hmm.
on knowing where do you want to go, and also it's also hard to be able to choose that. Okay, I will only be applying to a set of companies, right? And I
Hmm.
do not want to apply for a lot of companies. A lot of us do not have that option, right? So most likely, what will happen is that you will end up applying to the companies that are hiring, and who are ready to interview you. So in that case, I think in the early careers, it's probably the idea is that focus more on your strengths and try to have a horizontal in data science, which try to make that as a strength, right? And as you grow into your career, maybe you can add some verticals, which can be the domains that you build
Hmm.
expertise in, right? Unless somebody, the example that I gave, maybe a person like that can has already some sort of a vertical inclination, right? So for
Correct.
somebody like that, it makes sense to try at least targeting companies in that area, right? But let's say for a fresher who is maybe from an IT or a non-IT background, it makes sense to focus on the strengths in the horizontal area, which is data science, right? Which is programming, mathematics, and be able to solve business problems,
Correct.
right?
That's what is
So
horizontal. Yeah.
yes, that's extremely important. That how do you solve a data science problem? That should start becoming your strength, and
Hmm.
slowly as you move on, you can add more feathers to the cap.
Correct. Correct. I like there is never going to be a hat full of feathers. You eventually develop and put, one on one and try to understand and keep
Exactly.
that in front of the table.
Yep.
Right. All right. So now I know how to prep for my data interview. Is there like now I've also prepped for and built my resume. How do I position myself in the job market? How do I stand out from the competition? You mentioned, other than me coming from a data science or an engineering background, there are people, and this field has been so kind that, anybody with any skill of any side, if they are master of it, they can actually, or have a knack for it, they might get into it. So it just multiplies my competition in the first place, right? So how do I put myself out? How do I position myself?
Correct. So there's no easy answer for this. I think,
Yeah,
or there's no easy solution for how to succeed at positioning
right.
yourself and getting a job, right? So definitely it has to be through working hard in the specified area. But if the question is how do you stand out, I think what I would say is that start gathering where do you want to go, right? Or at least have define what you would like to achieve in maybe next 6 months or 1 year. Then consistent practice or having a roadmap that will take you from where you are to what that goal is going to be. Um, while doing this, I think building a very good portfolio is important, right?
Hmm.
As I mentioned, right now resume is very important, but also what do you build in the process, or what can you build as a person, right? That's important. So standing out is extremely, or portfolio can add a lot of weight in terms of you standing out, right? So maybe creating a GitHub page for yourself, which demonstrates a lot
Hmm.
of projects that you have done, or connecting with like-minded people on LinkedIn, sharing the kind of work that you are doing, maybe even picking up a hobby project, right? Because a lot of people say, okay, I do not have experience. So how do I stand out, or how do I gain that experience? So one
Correct.
of the easiest ways here is to pick up a hobby project where typically an area that you are interested in, and keep working on that, right? It's not, you don't have an end goal, because you will obviously, there's a lot for all of us to learn, right? So how do you
Hmm.
continuously learn newer things, maybe a newer algorithm, maybe bring in a little more engineering components, maybe put this out on the cloud, right? How do you continuously grow? So this is one, this will add standing out in two ways, right? One, in terms of perseverance of a person, that, yeah, this person wants to do something, it's sticking with the problems
Correct.
to get solved.
There is consistency, right?
And secondly, it's also more of adding different tech skills while you do that, or going more in depth for the data science itself, right? So that can be a very good approach. What unfortunately ends up happening is that, let's say, okay, I have done a Titanic course, or I've solved the Titanic problem from Kaggle.
Hmm.
I have
Yeah.
that on my resume. Okay, why am I not getting interview calls? Right. So the
Hmm.
challenge is that, okay, applicability of that in real world is maybe, yes, theoretically there are a lot of things that a person would have learned, but then hobby project wherein maybe you could get data or scrape data by yourself, maybe store data somewhere and do something, build a ML model, maybe deploy something. The kind of skills that you can add and you can show this in an interview can make a person stand out, right? So just think about this as an interview. Okay, the tech person or the interviewer asks me, okay, can you just talk about this project? And you say yes. You just start explaining that, and maybe question, do you mind if I
Hmm.
just show you what I have built, right? And you
Yeah.
start sharing your screen and say, oh, this is the code that I have written, and this is where it's deployed. Start showing the functionalities, right? The kind of impression that has is 100x more than what a person who just can explain or knows what to do, right? So that's some of the
Correct.
things, how to stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. That just creates multifold impression, not just, showcasing maybe your code, maybe you could just show the end product, or maybe you could just articulate it all in just a simple PowerPoint and, focus it out and try to show end to end, what did you do? And maybe, that might just also help understand that it's not just a technical skill that I have, but I also understand translating it to the business and solving the problem in the first place. So even though you are from a non-IT background, from IT background, from engineering, non-computer science background, irrespective of that, if you could do this and help the interviewer in that span of 30 to 1 hour, you know sh- understand or make him feel that you've actually done what you've done, and just talking about it, I think that is more than enough reasons for him to hire you in, right? Just on the go. Right. So we've talked about the different facets of interviews and preparation of it, but overall, when you appear for any interviews, it's primarily 2 to 4 rounds, or sometimes it goes away with also there is a take home assignments. So overall, you are quite involved, and the company does every check to check if you are going to be an asset for them, or if you are going to be a liability, not just in terms of technical skills, but are you also a fun person to work with? Check on your soft skills. And if there is a startup, I have given interview to almost every other data science leader that was present in the startup. So everyone does their own check, right? So now the company chooses you throughout the interview, but how do I also choose the company? How do I understand that the company is a right fit for me? How do I look out for the red flags in the process and understand, is that something, because there are times where people might give a role, the name of data scientist, or, data research engineer or something, but at the end of the day, it might just be a data analyst job or a data entry job, and it might just be a glorified version, but that might have explained in the job description, and you cannot just simply abide by it. So how do I check out for these red flags, and how do I know the right fit?
Yeah. So I think there are two facets of this question. The first question is, let's say, in
Hmm.
in today's extremely competitive world, or let's say the kind of job market that we have seen in the last 2 years. uh, there's no dearth of jobs for the right skill, right? So
Right.
what's extremely important for every aspirant to understand is that uh, it's also important for you to consider a lot of factors while you are choosing a company, right? It's very
Right.
common these days to hear, oh, I have offers from these two or three organizations. Um, which one should I choose? So, what's important in some of these things is that obviously the first factor that comes by default to our mind is the remuneration or the compensation that the role is offering. That can be a factor. I just want to highlight one thing that a lot of freshers miss out on here is the difference of fixed pay, variable pay, or
Hmm.
let's say retention or
Correct.
ESOPs, etc. Right? So always try to figure out what's the fixed pay is. That's the benchmark on the remuneration side. While remuneration is not the only factor, right? The second factor, what's important to consider is what's the domain of projects that you would be solving, right? Like, let's say, is it healthcare,
Hmm.
retail, BFSI, or something else, right?
Right.
And I'll come to this in a bit. The third thing itself is there could be different kind of companies, right? In terms of their growth, like there could be a very young startup to a mid-sized startup which is just exploding, or already established MNC, typically referred to as a 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100. And
Correct. Correct.
right? Each
Hmm.
of these organizations have their own DNA, or what's expected of employees in these three organizations is very different, right? Let's say in a startup, a person would be expected to do everything that's required to maybe get a new customer, because that's what the company is facing, which means maybe your job will not be limited to your title, right? You'll have to do everything to make it successful. Maybe in a
Absolutely.
large organization, it is much more structured and standardized, that maybe you are a data scientist, your ambit starts here and ends here, and you have these three different teams that you work with.
Correct.
Okay? Then the other facet of organizations is also, is it a consulting organization, is it a captive organization, is it a product company or a service company, right? So typically these four things, there would be more, but this is how I bring in. And each of these organizations have their own DNA, right? And all of them
Hmm.
have their own pros and cons, right? None of uh, I mean, it's very hard to say, okay, just this company is better, right? So
Correct.
what would then ultimately come down to is like, if in the initial careers it might be hard, so a lot of people end up choosing remuneration. But what's important to consider is where would I get growth opportunities, right? Like both in terms of getting more technical or opportunities to learn technically, or the kind of opportunities to grow more as a person. And Typically it's very easy to figure this out, right, from the kind of interview process that you have had, right? If or there's a saying that a company will never treat you better than what they treat you in an interview, because that's when they're wanting to have you. Let's say if you're
Correct.
not having a great interview process, then you could already imagine maybe what
Yeah.
would
The
be working at
stress.
that organization is like. So it's a mix of some of these choices that a person has on, and also bring in your strengths, bring in where do you really want to get to,
Hmm.
and make an informed choice that okay, I am choosing a company A versus B, versus just maybe making it on, okay, this is a fine company, I want to go here, or maybe this is a
Hmm.
paying me more, I want to
Right.
go here, right? That could
Hmm.
be a misconception that some of us have.
Right, right. So that gets me to my next question, like how do I calculate my worth? Like there's always this one question that is asked either in the first by the hiring HRs or how do I answer this question? Like what's your expected salary? I, from a fresher point of view, for me, even 3 LPA might be a decent salary. I am not sure how much do I be worth for. So how do I know or answer this question?
Correct. So, I mean, see, unfortunately, I would not be able to give a number here. But what
Yeah.
I want to focus on is that in the early career, right, it's important for all of us to be able to focus on the learning, right? Add a L
Hmm.
to the earn part to know your worth, right? So choose an opportunity based on, okay, will I get enough
Learning.
experience of learning? Maybe will I have
Hmm.
opportunities to maybe play different roles than just on the earn part or knowing your worth part? Because what typically happens is that once you have maybe crossed 3 to 5 year experience range, based on the kind of investments you have done in learning, then it exponentially grows, right?
Right.
But what might happen if in the initial few years, if it's just focusing on the salary part, you might end up making a wrong choice and get stuck there, which might not
Hmm.
open a lot of good opportunities which are actually good for you. So that's one part. But having said that, knowing your worth is a very subjective question, right? It's basis how badly do the company want a person to fill in the shoes, to how badly I want a job, to how good,
Correct.
how well of a fit it is, or how
Correct.
good the
Yeah.
interview go, right? So, say for example, if I'm getting my dream job on all the qualities that I would like, the kind of flexibility I like, uh, then I would be okay to even compensate on not getting the best remuneration, right? But maybe not for another role which is not my dream job, right? So I'd keep my levels a bit high. So it's not a very clear cut answer, I know, but it's I would say it's subjective.
Correct. Correct. It's always a trade-off for sure. It's a trade-off, but it's definitely more biased towards learning in the initial years of your career as compared to when you move forward. It's just then extrapolating your knowledge and leveraging what you can get to the table as compared to what is the remuneration is just a part of it, and it might exponentially grow as you get the value. So
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
think definitely. So as a fresher, it's a difficult journey. I wouldn't say impossible, but it's a very tough journey, to keep applying, getting interviews, and there might be a times where people might ask you for the experience. You might not have enough of them, and then you end up getting rejected. So a lot of people get discouraged, and they don't know how to just get up every day and do the same thing again until they find the right one. So, what are your thoughts on dealing with them and dealing with the rejection and discouragement?
Correct. So I think the first point here is that it's a long answer to your question, but the answer is for a person to get a job, it's not just the person's skills that define whether he's getting a job or not. Right. So yes, skills is one part of the equation, but there is a lot of other things that are also there, right? So let's say if one of you are going through that phase of rejections, uh, maybe this might be helpful. Um, Obviously, a company is not just interviewing you, right? They're interviewing a lot more people. uh,
Hmm.
what a company needs is very well, kind of, a lot of companies have a very well thought through persona of a role, or of a person that want that, right? So what they are trying to figure out is, will this person be fitting this persona, right? And
Correct.
skills are a part of it, right? Your education background, your work experience, uh, the kind of diversity that's required in the team, on of various levels, right? Of let's say the maturity of a person, of let's say different levels of roles, different aspirations. Let's say somebody who is aspiring to stay in the individual track versus somebody who is wanting to move to a leadership track. A lot of
Hmm.
these things come into play in the final decision that, okay, we want to offer you, right? So
Correct.
if somebody is not offering you, don't think that you are not worth it. So that's the first point that I would say, right? It's normal to get disappointed, and it's okay, completely okay to get disappointed.
Yeah.
um, but this would be the first point. But now that you're there, obviously take a break to figure out what went wrong, right? Or what can I as a person do better in the next interview, right? So try to reach out to the recruiter and ask for the feedback politely, right? And as to what
Hmm.
can I do better, that will help me crack into this. And most of good reputed organizations provide that feedback, right? So
Correct.
that's one thing. Connect with your peers or friends, right? And try to figure out maybe what I am doing wrong, because it's common to have blind spots, right? Like I have my own blind spot. So maybe somebody else is seeing maybe the kind of mistakes I'm doing and help me pinpoint there. Having a coach or a mentor definitely helps because they are always trying to push you in the right direction. They'll help you
See a
question your
bigger picture.
decisions,
Yeah.
uh, show the larger picture kind of thing, right? So that definitely helps. What is also or the field itself is like that is that imposter syndrome is real, right? So what can happen is, let's say if you're going through some
Hmm.
rejections, it's like, oh, am I really worth it kind of questions start coming in. But
Yeah.
the best way to tackle that is, okay, take it slow, talk to people, but stay consistent. And if it's defined that you want to get there, and if you're choosing the right path, sooner or later you will end up there, right? It's just about consistently trying to get there and not giving up is what is important.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's more about, I think interviews should be taken more as a practice skill. It's more about, the more you practice, the more better you're going to be at it. So it's just, at every interview, maybe just sit back and reflect on what did you do good, because somewhere down the mind you already know when you give an exam, when you give an interview, you know what went absolutely amazing, you know what didn't go as much as you expected it to be, and your weak spots eventually, and over a collective interview processes you might collate some and then start working on them, as compared to you already know your strengths. So two ways to go about work on the weaknesses that you might have come across the process, and also try to drive the conversations around your strengths if that is something that you've already identified. That might also give you an added edge, and it might give you a sense of confidence that you might answer the things upon, as compared to relying on the knowledge that you have.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Just one closing point on this, Ekta. It's important to be balancing out the interviews as well, right? Like I would like to analogically connect it to the saying that before you edit the resume, edit your skills, right?
Yeah.
So in a similar way, if you're having an interview today and there's another one lined up tomorrow, it's extremely hard for you to be able to meaningfully change something, right?
Hmm.
So have enough space in between two interviews, especially if they're important, and keep time for preparation. And it's also advisable to not apply for everything. Don't in desperation do not try to apply for hundreds of companies and attend more interviews. What might happen is, let's say if you get rejected in a series of interviews, uh, a person would get very much demoralized. Instead, if I'm being a little bit, I know we can't be choosing everything, but at least
Hmm.
pace it out that, okay, today I'm interviewing, maybe in the next interview is after 5 days, right? Which gives me at least some time to sit down, collect the feedback, work on some things, revise, and then give my best. So that is extremely helpful.
That's an amazing tip. Yeah, absolutely. And you need to sit back and reflect and then start working on it again, as compared to just hopping from one boat to the other. Yeah,
Yep.
that actually makes sense. All right, so we have a lot of bunch of questions that have come up, and let's cater to them one by one. So, a lot of people are asking around. I want to go for Google as a data analyst. Please tell me how to crack Google apprenticeship, says Soumya Ranjan Dash. Do you want to take this up, then? It's the
Sure.
similar
So,
that we just addressed earlier as well.
yeah, yeah. So I think, Soumya Ranjan, if you're very clear that you want to target for this role, right? I think half of the problem is solved. What you need to be doing is get onto LinkedIn, try to find out at least 10 people who are doing this role. Try to find out what their skills are. If you're lucky, you might find some of their resumes on LinkedIn, etc. Also try to find out the position description there. So that should give you a very clear idea of what is the requisite skills and the level of skills that are required. Self-evaluate yourself on where you are in that journey, and all you need to do is cover that gap. I know it's much easier to say than actually do it, but that's almost everything that you will require to maybe crack that interview. Obviously, networking with people in this area, or let's say who are already in the job, or having support of a mentor or a coach who has already done that or something similar, will help you increase the chances of you converting it much earlier.
Right, right. So, as part of Q&A, we have a few more questions around how to prepare for coding round in interviews.
Correct. So, coding is a very important part of anybody becoming a good data scientist, right? Because also with now the kind of roles like full stack data scientist, it's important that a data scientist is not just restricted to DS. So a lot of engineering skills are also expected from a good data scientist in a lot of companies, right? So having said that, the first thing that's important is the programming language itself. I know we're talking data science, so Python is a de facto in a lot of companies, but also try to find out more about the role, the organization's choices, right? Like a lot of organizations would have made a de facto choice on what their pipeline is. Let's say if I am a car maker, then most likely all my models are in Java or C++ because it needs to be integrated into the existing OEM modules, right? Most likely it's not Python, right? So then you need to be prepared in that language. So first thing is knowing that, right? Know what's important in the company. The fundamentals remain the same, right? Like you need to be definitely knowing the fundamentals of programming. It might be object-oriented, function-oriented programming languages. The third part is when you bring in the programming language, try to know some of the peculiarities of the programming language, like how is Python different from a Java, right? Or what newer things Scala brings in, right? It being both function and object kind of a language, right? So that distinction or a breadth knowledge is extremely helpful. The final thing is the syntax, right? Which is what is important for you to be cracking the interviews. But let's say if 1, 2, and 3 are wrong, and if you only know the syntax, it might be hard for you to crack, right? So using the right data design patterns is important to crack good interviews or good organizations. So if you're not very sure about the, let's say, some of the OOPS concepts, while your syntax is right, it will not help you crack there. Right design patterns, right syntax, right approach will get you there.
Correct. Right. Also, I would just like to add one more point, that there are times where, you might be given on the spot coding tests and you might get nervous about it, but it's more about if you could write down the pseudocode, even that works. Like, there were times when I had I am not somebody who can immediately think top of my head and, perform in that half an hour. But I just asked the interviewer, maybe, can I take this home for an hour and, just get things done, not on the camera, but, just think about and have my pseudocode ready. And it was highly appreciated. So it's nothing that you need to be amazing or top of the, world to clear that round. You can also go about and just communicate and, just put out the pseudocode or the logic behind how would you solve it. So yeah, definitely that would be one of the places where So overall, Nayan, we talked about the startup culture, we talked about the corporate. We have questions around which company, like service-based or product-based, are good for fresher. Do you want to take that one?
So I think, again, the answer here is that there is no clear choice, right? Everything has its own pros and cons, and maybe it's better to talk about that so that people can choose based on what suits them, right? So I think a lot of service organizations like, let's say, Infosys, Accenture, IBM, the kind of opportunities there are a little bit different than what maybe a product organization throws at you, right? In service
Hmm.
organizations, it's one point is that you get an opportunity to work in multiple domains, right? There are a lot of vertical teams.
Hmm.
So for somebody who's interested in that, maybe that is a chance to get in there, right?
Correct.
It's extremely possible. Let's say if right now if somebody is in one of those companies, it's possible to get onto a project which requires your current skill and the data science skill, and you can slowly bridge the gap there. That is a possibility in a service organization, right?
Correct.
Because there's a team who is working to build a product. There's a software engineer or a data analyst and the data scientist, right? And you want to slowly make a move. It's possible to get there. The third thing is India being one of the ITES major country, it's easy to typically get into a service company, right? So the opportunities are there even
Much
for
higher.
IT and
Yeah.
much higher. And Ekta, you spoke of how this digital stuff has made it easier for anybody to apply for the companies. And I am on
Yeah.
top of my mind, I can count of 3 or 4 organizations where anybody can apply, right, for roles. So
Correct.
that's there. And in terms of product organizations, I think what's the DNA is that engineering culture or the ability to productize stuff or a product
Hmm.
thinking kind of an approach is what is extremely important to succeed in a product company. Uh, Again, the choice of stack is very important in a product company because it's very well defined. Like I gave an example for, let's say, a car manufacturer, right? Whereas in a service
Right.
company, maybe one project is on Python and another is on R or something else is on PySpark or whatever, right? So that's a possibility. But in a product company, most likely there is a well defined stack and
Correct.
you're expected to get there. So yeah, these are the some things that I could think of.
Right. Like to add upon, I think then when I start as a fresher, I'm not sure which stack do I want to go ahead with, or which stack is something that might suit me the best. So maybe, exploring and having a buffet of options in front of me is more flexible in service as compared to when I start with a product and then just be a part of, say, the design team or the product team or the development team. So that might just narrow down my options and explorations overall. So yes, I think over all, we also have major questions around difference between data engineer, data scientist, and data analyst. What are different roles for a fresher? Say, so we have Saket, we have Kishan, we have a lot of folks talking about these things. So how is that different roles options for a fresher?
Sure. So maybe I can touch on this a bit, right? So let me start with data engineer. So typically, I think a data engineer is a person who is working with a lot of databases and pipelines, SQL, NoSQL kind of databases, building or moving data from one place to other, typically ETL processes,
Correct.
automating pipelines using, let's say, Kubeflow or Airflow or Informatica, etc., right? Definitely knowing the business is important because you need to know how to transform the data or how to apply business rules, etc. Right? So this is what a typical or let's say a generic data engineer is. But again, none of these definitions are cast in stone, as I said, right? Like every organization have their own definition. Uh, Moving on to a data analyst, I think in my view, a data analyst is an inquisitive personality,
Right.
starting with Excel to uh, Python, R, or
Hmm.
maybe even dashboarding tool like a Power BI, Tableau to help answer the question, right? Like if business is asking a question, how can you, or I missed out, SQL plays an important role also in the data analyst's skill set, right? How
Right.
do you use some of these things to get the data out and help answer the question? That's a data analyst. Data scientist is more on talking to the business, getting the problem, understanding the problem, okay, then figure out what kind of algorithm to apply, build the right features by the kind of domain knowledge you have, work with different stakeholders, build the model, experiment, add new features, parameters,
Hmm.
etc. Evaluate if this will deliver the business value, because that's a part of the data scientist expectation, and then get there, right? So that is what a data scientist would do. I'll just add one more point in this as a ML engineer. ML engineer is somebody who is there to scale things up, builds scalable backend APIs, or
Correct.
manages production systems to ensure they don't go down. More of helps continuous deliveries happen CI/CD using CI/CD pipelines, etc. There's also ML ops, which is more on let's say Dockerizing or the cloud infrastructure, how to
Hmm.
propagate all the things seamlessly. So these are the 4 or 5 roles that I can think of in the data science family,
For sure.
and I
Yeah.
just touched upon at a high level some of the skills that are required.
Right. So that's just high level, that might be similar, but again, that might differ from company to company, demarcations to demarcations, and boundaries to boundaries. Like it might be sometimes for a particular company, it might be more into cloud infrastructure as compared to, getting up all the CI/CD pipelines or getting the data pipelines in the first place. So overall, that's the idea. It might differ slightly here and there according to different companies. So then Pawan asks, looking into future, companies may ask us degree more than skills just to shortlist people. What can I do to make my future proof in this regard? I would say, in this scenario, the magical part of data science is more around no more. We just discussed it the other day that there's no degrees that are going to get you jobs on the table now. It's more about the skills. Even if you are somebody from a BSc background, or if you are somebody who was a dentist in his previous career and now want to transition into a data science, it's more about what can you bring to the table, what business problem can you think of that might be a solution. That is what you get to the table. I think it's all about that as compared to, how many degrees do you have on your head, or how many degrees do you overall gain across. Yeah,
Yeah,
what do you
yeah, I
think
think
then?
I would largely agree on to that. Like, obviously, it's important to, at least what I understand is most of the organizations require a bachelor's degree, but to
Hmm.
gain an entry, I don't think it's hard and fast that it has to be a specific degree. Maybe some organizations still do, but more and more the industry is moving towards skill-based selection or outcome-based selection rather than
Hmm.
degree-based selection, which is a good thing for a lot of people who want to explore jobs in engineering or data science, because it's just
Okay.
okay, build stuff and show what you can do and you're on board.
Right. So Rinkesh asks, how is the entire interview process? I mean, what are the different rounds that are involved and what happens there? Maybe we can touch up on this briefly again for him.
Yeah, yeah. So, see, I would want to give all the things that are possible. Let's say
Yeah.
the first thing that can happen is HR typically comes through and just does a quick check on your fit. The second thing is a lot of companies have take-home assignment, as you spoke of Ekta, where they send you a data set, they give you a business problem, they want, and the timing differs, right? Some orgs say take one day, some organizations say 1 week, or maybe even a month, right? So you work
Right.
on that, share your GitHub repo or even a presentation to them. So that is very likely in data science selections. Then maybe in the next round you talk about the approach and machine learning related questions, etc. A lot of companies have rounds for, let's say, data structures and algorithms, design patterns. Typically, product companies have these dedicated rounds, which also include checking basics of program. I wouldn't say just basics, but the concepts of programming, data structures, and
Correct.
design thinking. Uh, Maybe post that, usually there are two ML rounds, one to check the depth and the other one for breadth basis in some
Hmm.
companies. But then there might be a round with a hiring manager as well, just to check culture fit or more of to understand you as a person, and finally the HR, right? So these are the 6 or 7 things which are maximum that are there in the industry, and
Correct.
basis on the type of the company or the role that you apply, it might vary from 2 to 3 interviews to up to 7 interviews for a data scientist.
Yeah, not necessarily that every process or every step or every round that we discuss might be there for every company. It might differ. Some companies might just be okay with take away assignment and just a technical interview. The others might shift, right? So that's touching up on high level. So HP asks which software helps to better data analysis like Excel or Tableau and SQL. I think we'll quickly touch here that Excel is the real OG. I would say it's the original gangster. There is nothing that you cannot do with Excel that you can with others. Of course, it has its own limitations, but I would say to start with, you should hone Excel to the best. Yeah. All right. So Kishan asks, where can we see ourselves in the next 10 years in the field of data science? Yeah, that's a
I
very
think
interesting
that's a
question.
very futuristic question.
Yeah,
While I can't predict where we'll go, I can definitely say that the boundaries are getting narrower and narrower. And I'll also try to link this with, I think, my next question. So what's happening is that the expectations from a data science per se is getting very broadened out, right? Like the kind of things
hmm,
that data science used to do 10 years back versus what you're expected to do now is much, much more.
now,
And partly the reason for this is a lot of automation is happening, right? So now it's extremely easy uh, for us to maybe build a model, because all we need to do is import it from a library that is pre-built and open source, use the right
correct.
things there and use it. But earlier it used to be much build things from ground up, or maybe you have to customize stuff from what's
Hmm,
available, suit to the org needs, etc. Right? And this is happening in all the areas. A lot of things have been automated in data engineering. A lot of new kind of tools have come up in DevOps or MLOps. Uh, Things are moving phenomenally on, let's say, how things used to be in databases. Earlier, it was more on-prem, server-based databases to now cloud kind of databases. Every org is now moving to cloud, right? So which makes it important, or which also makes it easier, I think, to my next question, to move, right? Tomorrow, let's say if you want to become a software engineer, it should be easier if you are really pursuing the path. Once you start as a data scientist, hone your programming, design thinking, data structure kind of skills, and you can even be a good back-end engineer if you pick up the right skills. Same is the thing with DevOps. So that's one good thing with data science is, as Ekta, I think you touched on the workflow, integrates with all the skills. And let's say if you are a very good data scientist with a lot of breadth, you get an opportunity to work on each of them. And then basis your aspirations and where you want to get to, you can pick one of them and maybe even specialize in that.
absolutely, Nan. All right. It's more, I think, things are going to come up. There are a lot of auto ML modules that are going to come up. For sure, tech is going to take our job because we are the ones to enable the tech to do that. But I'm pretty sure that the translation of the output, the translation of the insights to the business, and then actually like bridging the gap between the technical and the business knowledge is never going to go out of style. That's always that is going to be expected out of you. So honing not just technical skills but also the other soft skills around it to communicate, to articulate, to make business driven decisions is definitely something that one should
Yeah.
focus on.
So it's like no job is going to stay, right? Always keep upskilling and figuring out what next, instead of, okay, data science is going to stay for next 20 years. It's maybe it will stay, but the number of jobs will definitely become less.
Right. You are going to automate a lot of stuff for things that are going to be repetitive, but it's not something. So we used to live for the past few months, a few years, I would say, we used to live in the world of big data. Now the idea is more towards shifting from big data to organized data, to having data cleaned, having a good quality of data as compared to just cluttering and then demystifying all of these data insights. So I think, yeah, for sure, the things are going to transition, things are going to become more organized, but it's always that is going to be applied is the, the human touch to it, the human decisions or the gut instincts that we talked about earlier, that is always going to, be there, and they are going to drive the decisions further.
Yes, the titles might change, but the skills will continue to be there, right? Like the humanness or
Absolutely.
solving business problems, etc. So if
Hmm.
you have that and continue to pick up the next tech that is going to stay, I think that should be the strategy. Instead of sticking
Right.
to, okay, I am now a data scientist, I'll be a data
Yeah.
scientist for next 50 years.
Correct.
Probably a bad choice. Yeah.
I think learning is always going to be there, and all of these organizations that we join, every organization that I have been part of has always been promoting learning. It's never going to stop, and you need to upskill yourself continuously. And there's, in fact, when I joined Accenture as well, they have a clear roadmap. All of these companies that have come up, they want their data scientists, they want their team members to be highly upskilled and continuously learn. So that's never going to go out of style, and you always need to learn. That's the most exciting part, I would say, overall. All right, I think we are somewhere short of time, so we pretty much covered everything. I think one last question that I might have for you, Nayan, is, say, if you start again your data science career, or if you start again, given we give you 10 years now further, how would you do things differently? How would you take, what would be your take on things?
Correct. So I think if I am going back 10 years, I think the first thing that I would definitely do is maybe have somebody who can coach me, right? Because that's one thing that
Hmm.
I did not have in my early
Correct.
career. While today I work with a coach who helps me grow. So that's one thing more from that angle. But more technically, I would say I would have definitely adopted the engineering and cloud side a little bit more earlier if I had a choice. Because right now, the kind of roles I play, it's very seamless, right? It's data science, engineering, cloud, all comes in together to deliver a product. So that's something that I would do a little bit earlier if I had a choice.
Great, great, great. That was highly insightful. I think you also gave us a hint of where to focus ourselves, in the upcoming future. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much what we wanted to discuss, and we have most of the questions answered. If there is anything more, guys, please leave in your questions. We will answer them in the YouTube live and these for the sessions. So thank you so much for joining, Nen, and giving us amazing insights. I think that was highly helpful from a fresher point of view, from a person who has already been in the industry for a long time. I think for me as well, they were great tips to focus on. So, oh, thank you so much, for all of these.
Thank you, Ekta, for hosting this, and thanks for everybody joining. I think what I would like to end it with is it's a learning opportunity for all of us, including me. So sessions like this also help me to improve and learn a lot of new things from the young crowd. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. They were amazing. I hope we answered most of them. And stay tuned. We'll do these sessions every week with every different panels. You might get to learn a lot of new things and get your questions answered along. Yeah. So have a great weekend. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.